I'm Luke Sherville. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Gaffer. From time to time, you get an opportunity to light for tabletop, which is, anything on a surface, products, or, often if you shoot a commercial, then towards the end of the day, you set up kind of a still life of the product. In other situations, you might spend days on the product part of a commercial and to just to get it right, or there's slow motion, or there's some kind of practical effect that needs to happen. We have an opportunity to drop in on DP Tyler McPherron and Alan Steinheimer, Gaffer, and sort of drop in on their process of testing for an upcoming tabletop shoot. They had an issue. They both had sort of an idea of, how to solve it, but to make sure, they got together and did a test. So maybe you guys can set up your issue. Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Luke. The challenge in this case is we're doing this tabletop shoot with a bunch of pretty tight shots. And the creative direction is to have sort of a photography style look where you get hard shadows with a fair amount of fill in the shadows, but a key light that has a fair amount of wrap as well, which to me, looking at the references and sort of knowing the style, which kind of feels like a contemporary photo style and kind of something I see on Instagram and those sorts of places, it just felt more like a parabolic beam sort of light, sort of like a breezy, than it does the normal tools that we would work with, like a HMI through an 8x diffusion, for example. So I had some ideas of how I wanted to potentially attack it, and Alan had some ideas of what he thought would work, and we got together and tried out two different options to see how it would turn out.
And you guys were going to be on a fairly long shoot, so you wanted to get it right from the beginning, right?
8-day shoot coming up. So
Yeah, so totally worth giving it a test.
And just one thing to add there too is they really wanted consistency throughout the entire 8-day shoot. So finding something that worked right from the beginning is going to be really important for us.
As far as what you're shooting, you're not really shooting faces, right?
actually, the faces are excluded. It's really hands, bodies. It's really focusing on hands buying something on a tabletop situation that sort of replicates a store or a store countertop kind of thing. A lot of times we would think about this in terms of portrait lighting. Well, this is sort of not portrait lighting. It really is tabletop, even though there's like 2 people or 3 people maybe in the scene. We literally don't see their faces. So a little different approach in that regard. This is my favorite part of the business, is like the collaboration thing and being able to actually have a little bit of time, not so busy right now, to try out some concepts. Tyler brought up the Hudson Spider, which I still have yet to use. I've seen it a couple times. So I one of the guys in the shop has one. I assembled it, looked at it. It's like, all right, I can see the idea of it being that parabolic LED light that's bicolor, but really not enough output necessarily for a large scene that we were going to do, where we might see a whole countertop, might see some background stuff. Seemed a little bit better for real portraiture, basically, where you're seeing, head and shoulders kind of thing. And then we kicked it around some more. We talked about the Kurve, which is, there's actually 2 curves from Joker, K5600. There's a 4.5, and I guess there's a 7-foot, I think,
Yeah.
which sounds gigantic. So, but there's only a 4.5 foot in the Bay Area. So we just, like, that was going to be our test. Also, it seemed big enough for what we were shooting. My thought was the 800 bulb would be plenty. Tyler was thinking 1600. DP's always like those big lights. But I think the 800 in the end was enough foot candles. And then we've talked a lot about how a lot of people, or at least in our opinion, misuse parabolic lights. That they start out with this idea that they're going to use a parabolic light like the Breezy or the Kurve, or, I mean, you could probably say the Hudson Spider is an imitation of that, where there's no diffusion in front. So the soft and wrap actually comes from the fact that you're seeing the whole umbrella and it's actually wrapping around the face or the object. Or you'll see there's a bunch of pictures of apples on this tabletop that we use for the sample. And so I've been on a lot of shoots where, as the gaffer, I've been told to bring a Kurve or a Breezy, and then someone asked to put diffusion in front of it. Ends up just being like any other softbox light. So our goal in this was to really focus in on that idea of an actual parabolic fixture that was going to give you that kind of wrap, that sort of umbrella, still photography kind of silver umbrella look. And I thought that we might be able to get there with a 4K with a chimera and silver on the inside in front of, hanging on front of the light. But basically didn't really get there. Really there's a unique look to that whole curve parabolic wrap that's just
Wait
different.
a minute. You said 4K
Fresnel.
4K Fresnel. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and just 4K Fresnel raw as a Fresnel.
Well, I was thinking I'd put a small bit of diffusion inside, and that would create a similar kind of thing bouncing around the silver. I never really amounted to much of anything. So,
but a Fresnel into the silver, are you bouncing it into the silver, or are you coming? What? I don't quite understand.
So the inside of the chimera has silver, and the idea was to put enough diffusion inside that it would bounce around and illuminate the silver within the chimera.
Oh.
All right, maybe it was a faulty idea, but
we thought it would give us a little more. We thought it would give us a little more wrap than just the 4K Fresnel without a chimera.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So yeah, when you first told me about this, that didn't ring a bell. So I got it. So those are your two options, and the Hudson Spider.
I didn't feel like it was going to be nearly enough output for what we needed it to do. So
Gotcha.
we just sort of didn't include that in the test. So I had looked at it a couple of days ago, set it up, looked at it, and was like, God, I just can't see us illuminating from 12 feet away and doing a good job of it. So
yeah. Okay. So how about we watch a video of just sort of the basic setup, and then we'll go to some of the more particulars. So here's this playing.
And what are we getting, the F8?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On spot with the Joker 800.
Okay, good. And the color temp on that was?
5774.
Okay.
Got the parabolic there, and is that like a more spotty mode, or?
That was the spottiest with the bulb as far back as it would go. And then later we did a flood where we pushed it forward. And amazingly enough, between the full spot and full flood, it was only one stop of difference. There's a huge amount of spread when you go to full flood. One of my, part of my lack of enthusiasm for the Kurve and why I was trying to suggest some other ideas was, we're so used to LEDs nowadays where we can change the color, we can dim, I can control it from an iPad, and it's very difficult to get scrims in front of that curve. I've sort of hand wired them in on occasion. And then color, it's 4.5 foot wide, so it's a little bit wider than a roll of gel, and it's just like, in this age of so much control, I feel like it's taking a step back, but it's a certain look, and in this case, I think our test showed, shooting an F8 or 5.6, if we go to the full flood, That's at 800 ASA. Was it 800 or 500?
500.
500. We're in the ballpark. You know, that's a reasonable f-stop to that I can any kind of matching light around there that I can get to that kind of, you know, f-stop. I've had problems where I was in closer on a portrait and there was just too many foot candles. So
Yeah. And maybe to that same point, Tyler, that was kind of like why the Hudson Spider would have been great, because you've got all that control, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
in an
So
ideal world, you know,
yeah,
we would be able to dim and shift our color temperature, which
yeah,
is the advantage of the Hudson Spider.
totally.
I think if there was a giant Hudson Spider, we might have gone that route.
Yeah.
You know, they have larger configurations for the reflector, but it's still the same amount of LEDs. So that's, you're not really increasing the foot candles that much, just sort of
Right.
some of the silver
More
size.
more reflector. Yeah. Well, what are you showing there?
And we're just showing this the fall off. The spot thing is in the middle of the white card, and then you can, of course, I'm shadowing it over there, but some amount of fall off. It's not totally even on the spot.
And this is the spot of the curve.
That's right.
Okay. And then did you do other images of this with the flood mode or
We did not.
Fresnel?
It's pretty
Okay.
darn even when it's in flood.
And then moving on, here we've got curve at full spot. So that's on our tabletop.
And it's funny, I mean, we were looking at we had a leftover imitation hand from a Halloween shoot that we stuck in there. But I ended up looking at the apple almost as much in terms of the amount of sort of the quality of the wrap. That there's a sort of hard shadow, but then there's this really gradual sort of falling off, which I think is going to be important for the hands and the cards and all that, and that's going to happen in our shoot. Tyler tried to create a scenario that was something like some of the scenarios that we will be shooting.
Right. And this is for Halloween.
No, the hand was just from Halloween, a Halloween shoot.
Right. Okay. So this is without fill. And then this is adding fill.
So we're probably not going to go there. I was, you know, just to see a look-see,
Okay.
or it'll be a lot less than that.
Yeah, I feel like
Okay.
we'll, contrast-wise, we'll probably land somewhere in between no fill and this close fill that we added.
Okay. And then now here's the apple.
You can see it's got a distinct shadow, but look at all the fuzziness around it. It's a certain feel. I mean, I think both Tyler and I, in a way, are attributing that to a sort of silver umbrella feel.
And you didn't get that with the Fresnel.
Did not, no.
Okay. And then this is looking down the barrel
Yep.
of the curve. So then moving on here, 4K in the Chimera with diffusion inside or not?
We put a little piece of diffusion inside to start with, and that was a total failure.
And then this is the apple.
Got the little tiny bit of diffusion, sort of an equivalent of opal on the inside, and you can see it just doesn't, there's not that wrap around the shadow itself.
Right.
That's a more traditional, I mean, that is 12 feet away, so it's sort of what you might expect out of a, you know, of a Fresnel on a object that's 12 feet away.
And then this was diffusion further out.
Then we started with opal, put opal in front of the whole chimera, and then I think if you keep going down, you'll see there's the apple with the opal. That's probably, you know, getting closer to what that curve looks like, but still not quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
softening the edges, but not bringing it around the apple as much.
so you're getting the softness sort of towards the end, but it's still not fuzzy all around. And then now you're trying some more diffusion.
Yep, and then it's all in order here. So then we went to 250.
Okay.
It's, you know, the best imitation of the curve, but it feels slightly different. The shadow in the middle is really hard, and then it's sort of a fast fall off. You know, I don't know. The curve does something somewhat amazing. You know, that parabolic light. I mean, there's a lot of still photographers that are just in love with it, you know, and I can sort of see why after this little test, you know. I mean, the other thing too, these, you know, cameras like the Venice have so much compression that they see so much into the shadows that, you know, I'm finding I just need to fill a lot less than I used to, you know.
Hmm.
Sometimes we'd have active fills. I'm almost always using passive fills nowadays because the cameras just see so much into it.
Yeah. And we're going to be working with a DIT who's doing a live grade on set. So we'll have a pretty accurate representation of
Nice.
the look they want, both in the grade and in the lighting.
That's interesting because that's sort of like being on a still shoot.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sort of seeing it right away, and you're kind of using a still light in a sense, so it's kind of works. But then they definitely know what they want, what they have, if you have the grade right away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, in some ways the size of the curve, that 4.5 sort of amount of light coming towards the object, is almost like a giant Fresnel. It's like, I mean, it feels almost like that in the sense of, you know, that sort of parallel beams that are doing a little bit of the wraparound on some of the objects, you know. And of course, nobody has a 4.5-foot Fresnel anywhere, so this is sort of a way to get there. And at 800 watts, I can plug it into the wall, which is all the better in terms of the 4K Fresnel requires some kind of larger power source.
Yeah. Now with 1600, you didn't try it, but would that have just given you too much light, or could you have taken it further away? Would that maybe have helped for something? I don't know.
You know, I always feel like there's an ideal distance for the light to be where the amount of foot candles you're getting, the amount of wrap, the amount of coverage, and if we put it basically park the stand 12 feet from the center of the table, it's sort of feeling like where I think we're going to end up 12 or 13 feet away. That's my guess. I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
little bit of intuition. I could be wrong. So
I think you're right. Yeah. And I wasn't too worried about the amount of output that we're getting. I felt like 5.6 is probably where we're going to be. And the Venice has a dual native ISO, so it's really easy to go to 2500 and as a base and drop it down to 1000 if we want to.
And it's
We
not
need a
like you're
little
doing high speed.
right. Yeah. And it's all just for social media. So it's not going to go to the big screen, unfortunately.
For a lot of people, the degree you went to, you know, find that shadow, that light, will just like, you know, be beyond, like they won't even know what they're looking at. But you guys, you know, in the stage of your career, you're being, you know, very detailed at what you're looking for, and I think that's really good for people to see, because that's what you kind of build up over time, this detailed approach, and says, like, you know, this actually does make a difference even for the web. uh Subconsciously, whatever, people will feel like, oh, that's daylight, you know, or whatever. I think that's interesting on a certain psychological level, as well as sort of um, professional level.
yeah, I think also a lot of social media is seen on a phone, not necessarily a desktop. That's probably an older generation thing. And I think in a way, things that are more graphic, things that have a little bit more contrast probably stand out a little better, you know?
The other thing about doing this test is this isn't the first time this look has come up for me lately. In the past few years, I've had, you know, probably 3 or 4 requests for this like sort of Instagrammy, hard light look. And I often, I think I've usually used like an M40. It's just like, this is our big light and we can use very little diffusion on it, or none. But then you just end up with so much more contrast than I want, and not really the right amount of wrap, based on the, still photography style of bouncing a small hard light into an umbrella. And so this is just, it just came to the point where it's like, there's got to be a better way. And there's got to be something in between using a bare M40 and renting a expensive Breezy. So I feel like we're on the right track.
Yeah. I mean,
Awesome.
maybe someday if a 20K LED Fresnel ever makes it to the Bay Area, which doesn't seem anytime soon, that might be another alternative, test kind of thing. That big lens with the more wraparound, but exceedingly expensive and not even available here locally. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see if, the return of the Fresnel. It's like there's a lot of small Fresnels coming, and eventually that may be larger Fresnels. So, yeah, who knows? And then you have all that tunability, and on top of it, RGB potentially. So, yeah, cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for bringing this up. It's probably not something that I do a lot of, just because of budget and time and stuff like that. But it's really nice to sort of get a little window into what you guys were playing with today.
Yeah.
So
it was fun to see the parabolic lights in action. I mean, I only have some familiarity with it, so I'm looking forward to the shoot.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we got to do a test, and it is gonna, if we go with this light, it's gonna have some limitations for sure, but I feel like we have a pretty good sense of what they are and can mitigate them pretty well.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot, and thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time. It's funny, today we were doing a stand-up, with a person, and so I thought originally it was going to be S60, 5-foot octa, away you go, and then at the last minute I was thinking like, no, we got windows, let's make it an 800 Joker into a 5-foot octa, and we put that up, and we're like, no, we still need more. So it ended up being an M18 through a 6x, half grid. And it's like, oh, you know what? That's actually pretty good. It's actually, we still need a little more. So I put like 2 S60s on either side of it, just the way we were set up. Wow. And, it doesn't look fantastic, but it looks okay. And then there's like the scratch is a 400 Jolico, with a double and some Hampshire, and it's an event type thing, and it's like, you guys, the subtlety that you're working at is so different from what I'm on. So I tried to speak to that a little bit. I didn't do such a good job, but anyway, I'm glad there's people out there.
It's subtle.
I'm glad you guys are spinning your propellers. That's good for all of us.
Yeah.